People who can stay calm during a confrontation, they're a rare breed. And the secret to doing this is knowing the skills that you need to get it done. In this video, I'm going to reveal the ways that I went from struggling with confrontation to being able to stay calm and open when the conversations get hard. Now, not all the time, but most of the time I can do this. So stay to the end for a story of how it can be done. And you can even do it on a date. I've done it. The first step before you get into a crucial conversation or something that's going to be hard is understanding that there's a 5-to-1 ratio. You got to do 5 positives to every criticism that you're going to give. Don't overwhelm somebody with a pile of criticisms. If you don't want to dive into a confrontation that is like, tone it down. Don't unload, right? You want effective communication, then you got to slow it down. Only one piece of criticism to every 5 positives. It's a rule that if you stick with, will change everything that you do. When I was consulting in oil and gas, I had a situation where I had to evaluate leaders in their meetings. And I remember I was evaluating this one man's meeting, and oh my gosh, it was really, really rough. But he did a few good things. He started the meeting on time. He had good pacing in his conversation. He finished the meeting on time. He had an agenda, but I had to dig for these. And I had a page of negatives of what I saw. And you know what? I sat down with this guy at the end and give him feedback on his meeting. And rather than unload on him, even though I had a timeline on what I was supposed to accomplish with this man, I gave him his 5 positives, which was all I could come up with. And I focused on the most important thing that I thought he needed to learn out of this whole process. One thing. And he learned it. And you know what? It changed everything. The one time I did it, I just stuck to it. It so quickly transformed a difficult conversation into something where he was anxious to learn more and do more. So 5-to-1, it's an important ratio to remember. The second thing is understand the internal narratives and assumptions you are making. The stories that you're telling yourself for why this person is attacking you or why this person is doing something to you, why they're confronting you in this way. If you need to have this difficult conversation with this person, you need to understand why your narratives are telling you these negative things about them. If you know that these are narratives and what you're being told, then you can actually make the assumptions less a reality and a fact and more a point of curiosity, right? This is an important step to do because if you don't understand what your narratives are, you think they're all facts. The third thing you want to do is ask yourself, how does a rational person get to this frame of mind where they're talking to me in this way? This comes directly from a book called Crucial Conversations. You think, what is the story I'm telling myself? This goes back to the narratives, right? How could a person that's rational and reasonable think these things about me? When you're in a conflict, there's usually some you're fucking crazy. What are you talking about, right? You can have that narrative in your mind, but rather than saying you're crazy, what are you talking about? You got to say to yourself, how does a rational person like you get to the assumptions that they're getting to? And as you begin to think about that, then you open yourself up to the next step, which is to get curious. Number 4. Get curious. If you're curious, you can't be confrontational because now you're in a space where you're really truly trying to understand. How is it that you're thinking these types of things? Now you can't say it that way, right? You don't want to say, how are you possibly thinking that? Because that seems accusatory. But you could say, I'm wondering, are you thinking that I'm attacking you right now? Well, yes, you are, or whatever it is, right? You get to start to get behind the curtain of the assumptions and the narratives you're telling you and the idea that this person is crazy. And the curiosity will present you with questions that will reveal the truth behind what is causing the confrontation to happen. Curiosity is deeply important. It can only be gotten to once you let go of the stream of narratives. You have complimented the person, not been overly critical, and you recognize they are rational. They're not crazy, because likely they are, but they're seeming to act crazy because you don't understand the reasoning behind what is going on. So I actually had an experience with this when I was on a date one time, and I took this girl out on a date, and I kind of had a feeling about her because I was still trying to figure out how not to redate the person that I had left. And the person I'd left had been highly critical of me, and I didn't want to date somebody that was that judgmental of me all the time because I didn't like it. But I'm somebody that accepts a lot of criticism from people generally. That's who I was because I had low self-worth. And so I was trying to build myself up so I wouldn't accept that anymore. And so I took this girl on a date, and in the process of the date, I recognized that she was a Mormon girl. I'm here in Utah, and I didn't know she was a Mormon girl. And I have some fundamentally different behaviors and points of view than Mormons hold, and so I just generally don't date women that are Mormons, that are active, because I don't want to deal with the judgment that I feel comes from that perspective. Not that it's bad, it's just a perspective I don't want to deal with. And I found out on the course of my date that she was a practicing Mormon, and I was like, oh, well, okay. And I felt the whole night that she was judging me, because I swear a lot. And I felt like every time I swore, she was like rolling her eyes and showing kind of contempt, and I was, at the end of the date, done. I was like, I'm not dating that girl again. And I, in fact, talked to my friend. My friend was like, I said, hey, did I just date my ex again? And he was like, yep. And we started laughing because I was so glad that I was able to recognize what I had done. And then, a few weeks later, this girl calls me up, asks me out on a date. And I was like, wow. But I thought, I'm curious, I'm gonna go. So I went, and I got there, and I said right out of the gates, I said, hey, yeah, like she was like, like happy to see me. And I said, I gave her a bunch of compliments. And then I said, I didn't think that we were going to go on another date because I felt like last time we went on a date that you were really judgmental toward me. And she kind of was like, what? I could see her veil go up. And I said, I don't know if that's the case because the truth is I didn't know that you were a practicing Mormon. And I may have some personal triggers because of my experience that I placed upon you. So if I'm wrong about what was happening and you weren't judging me, I apologize. And I recognize that I probably have work to do, right? And so what I was doing was I was telling her about my personal narratives in the background of my mind that made me come to the conclusions that I came to. And I was giving her the assumption that she was a rational and reasonable human and very possibly had no judgment for me, and that it was all me reflecting onto her, right? And her answer was, no, I wasn't judging you. And I was like, okay, I got work to do, clearly, right? And I do, I really do, so it wasn't a big thing to admit. And about 5 minutes later, she comes back and she says, actually, I was judging you. And I hadn't mentioned what I felt she was judging me on. And I said, oh, really? What were you judging me about? And she says, you swear a lot, and that's a sign of an uneducated man. And I just laughed, right? I said, okay, I hear you. I felt that. I truly did. And so then we had a discussion about swearing and education and what it means, and it was really cool, and we got into more stuff, and it ended up being a really great conversation that I would have never had with this person because rather than confronting her and saying, you're judgmental, I know you are, right? And coming at her and say, every time I swore, I saw you roll your eyes, which would have made her go, I am not judgmental, you're a terrible person, you have bad language, right? That could have been the nature of the conversation. It would have gone nowhere. I would have not been friends with this person, and we would have walked away, and both of us would have said, what a horrible person, right? But I walked away, and I was like, she sees the world differently than me, but she's a cool person. She's fine. And maybe she thinks I'm just an uneducated guy that swears a lot. I don't know. But the reality is I have faced many, many scenarios where these are potentially very difficult conversations, and I follow these steps, right? I follow them through, and as I follow them through, it drops the defensiveness of the person in front of me. And what can be an extremely difficult conversation, like the book, they call it Crucial Conversations, when you understand your internal narratives, you understand this person is a reasonable and rational human, you get curious, and you begin to ask with curiosity what you think might be happening, laying it open for them, and you first start by actually giving them positive feedback so that they feel like they're not being attacked, people open up to you. They can tell you all kinds of things because it's safe to talk to you. You don't have to be mad at them. You can just hear what they have to say, and you can even disagree like we did. We disagreed on a lot of things that day, and it's safe to disagree because it doesn't matter. This is what you do. This is how you have a very difficult conversation without becoming combative. If you like that, I hope you stick around. I got another video coming up on how to heal a broken heart after a divorce. I'm James Burnham. Thanks for joining me.